Welcome back to Yoga Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waycott. I feel like I have so many things that I want to get you caught up on. I feel like so many exciting things have happened this past week, but I'm going to do my best to stay focused in today's episode and try to talk about one thing per episode. So I feel like if you've been listening to the podcast closely, you may have noticed that I have been alluding very quietly to the fact that I've been needing a larger space for my pre-registered yoga classes for a really long time at this point. Definitely for the last year and a half, we have needed a larger space. And the time has come that I can finally tell you that I have kind of taken the plunge and found a larger space to move my pre-registered classes to. And it honestly feels like a really, really exciting new chapter. This is a story that means a lot to me, and it's really exciting to be taking this step. And so, as we do on Yoga Insider Podcast, I want to take you behind the scenes today and share just a little bit about the journey that went into finding a new space, because I feel like it's definitely a story of overcoming uncertainty and a story that demonstrates the kind of growth that is possible for us as yoga teachers. So for today, again, it's another chatty episode, a storytelling kind of episode. Grab yourself a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable, and enjoy. So in order for this story to make sense, I feel like I have to go back in time a little bit and give you some context for how I got to where I am today. And if you listen to the podcast, you've probably heard me talk about my pre-registered yoga classes before on lots of different episodes because they are such a foundational part of the work I do. They're a really important part of my business. And we need to go back in time a little bit so that what I'm going to tell you makes sense. So about 6 years ago, so 2020, I can't believe it was that long ago, I was in the middle of a year-long 300-hour yoga teacher training. And during that year, we experienced a global pandemic, as you all know, that was really tough on the yoga industry. And if you were already teaching yoga at that point in time, or even if you were a student of yoga during that time period, you know basically that the pandemic turned everything that we knew in the yoga industry on its head. And a lot of studio spaces didn't survive during that time. It was just so tough on the industry. And so during that time when I lost all of my work and studios and spaces that I'd known for a long time suddenly no longer existed, I was really determined to find a way to keep showing up for my community and to find a way to keep supporting the students that I'd already been working with for years at that point. And I've talked about this before, that one of the ways that I did that was by creating online content and an online subscription platform where I was able to offer on-demand yoga classes as well as Zoom privates and things like that. And then additionally, when, depending on where you were living, when things started to open up a little bit, I also started to pursue offering pre-registered classes. And I basically felt like I needed to find a space that I could rent and bring my students to teach them, just because a lot of the studios that we'd known and spaces that we'd known no longer existed. So I was like, I need to find a place to teach people. And so when I started my initial search, back around 2020, for spaces to start running pre-registered classes on like a consistent, ongoing basis. This is something that I'd done before, kind of on a smaller scale, like not as consistently. But when I started that initial search, it did not go very well. I reached out to places like dance studios, community halls, spaces that were kind of operated by the local municipality. And I explained, what I was looking for and that I was looking to rent their space to run some yoga classes. And surprisingly, I got a lot of rejections. And I actually didn't expect going into it that me coming forward and saying like, hey, I want to pay you money for your space to run classes, would be something that would be rejected so much, but it was. And a lot of places I remember, like, they didn't even want to entertain a conversation about it. And I realized that, there was just so much uncertainty at that point in time. And where I live, we were going through this kind of like merry-go-round situation where the provincial government would be like, okay, yoga classes and fitness classes, they can happen. And then they would shut them down for like 6 weeks. And then they would say, okay, now you can have them back, but like with restrictions. And it was just like this ongoing thing. And it was just a very uncertain time. So part of the rejections and the fact that it didn't go super well, I think it wasn't just about me. It was about like the broader situation. So anyways, I reached out to a ton of different places. They were like, nah, we're not interested. Like, we actually don't even want to talk to you about having your yoga classes in our space. And I had a lot of no's, and it took a long time to find the space that we eventually settled on. And that's the space that I've been running my pre-registered classes out of for about 5 years now. So it is what I would call like a multidisciplinary clinic. And it's kind of like this little studio space within a clinic that has like different units in 2 different buildings. And that space has honestly been perfect for us. Like, it's been such a great space to grow. Basically, when you walk in, it's just like a rectangular room. It kind of looks like a place where you might do exercise. Like, there's mirrors on one wall. And over the last 5 years, we've shared that space with physiotherapists, with RMTs, athletic therapists, acupuncturists, chiropractors. And it's kind of cool because like we always use that space after hours for yoga when the clinic's closed. So like I come in with my key, set up for classes. We do our thing in the evening, we leave. It's almost like nobody would even know that we were there. And it's just been like such a harmonious situation. It's just been perfect. And especially for the nature of my classes and what I do. Like, I only offer pre-registered classes a couple of nights per week. And so it doesn't make sense for me to like open a yoga studio or lease out a commercial space on my own when my needs are like fairly small in terms of what I do. So anyways, we've been in that space for like the last 5 years. And initially, when I started out in that space, I was offering 2 pre-registered series per week because I always kind of wanted to start out on the more conservative side. Like, I didn't want to put in too many classes right away. I prefer to do less and then try to fill those classes before I add anything else. So we started with 2 classes. Eventually, it grew to 4. I'm currently running 5 completely full pre-registered series per week right now. And we could definitely add more. Like, there's demand for more, but I also have like my own capacity in terms of teaching. And yeah, so classes were able to grow in that clinic space, and we survived multiple like forced COVID shutdowns and lots of uncertainty in the world. And that space was really my constant as my career grew and evolved over the last 5 years as well, because there's been a lot of change for me in that time, personally and professionally. And I was teaching in that space when I launched my 200-hour yoga teacher training program and, started teaching that program out in my community. That space was there for me to fall back on when I completely stepped away from studio teaching and became a fully independent yoga teacher. And I really want to acknowledge just like how important that space has been for me, because it's where I actually proved to myself that I can run independent yoga classes and that I can run an independent yoga business and that people will come for you and they'll come for the community that they get from classes, even if you're not in the most aesthetically pleasing, trendy, fancy kind of space. Like, it was just incredible. And that's huge. Like, so much growth took place for my community there as well. And over the past couple of years, as we've added more classes, those classes have become busier and busier. And I have like stretched the capacity of that little room to the point that I can't stretch it any further. And so what's happening right now is like every week I'm turning away new students who want to join series, new students who want to maybe just drop in and try a class and see what it's all about. I'm also turning away longtime students. Like maybe they go on vacation for a week and then they miss the sign up for classes at the beginning of the month, and suddenly they can't get a spot in the class that they've been attending for years and years. And I don't like being in that situation. Like, I know that some people will be like, oh, that's a good thing to have, right? Like, you're busy. But if you turn somebody away too many times, like, they're not going to want to come. They're going to find somewhere else to go. And I want to be able to have a space where I can be like, yeah, I have room for you. Like, yes, there's space for you to come to this yoga class, right? Like, it takes so much courage in the first place for a lot of people to just even consider joining a yoga class, let alone a yoga series. And so that's really been the situation, like the past year and a half, is that I have been cramming people into that space. And, I know like back in the day, at least again, where I'm from, like it used to be more common to have studios really, really packed and you're like mat to mat and, you've got your hand on someone's mat. And like, I know some people like that, but there's also people who just want to have a little bit more personal space, and it's not ideal. And so I was just starting to get this little inkling that like maybe it was time to start looking for a bigger space. But I really didn't humor the idea too much. It was just kind of like coming into the back of my mind. And I'm a Taurus sun. I am a fixed earth sign. And like, I am not the kind of person who just like voluntarily wants to change things. I was kind of like, you know what? We're comfy in this space. It's busy. Classes are going great. Like, why would I rock the boat? Why would I change anything? Even though I knew deep down that like, in order for things to grow, we did need to move into a bigger space. I was just a little bit like stuck in my ways. And then something happened. So back in December, I was informed that the lease on our current studio space is ending. And when I look back at it at this point, like it was perfect timing. It could not have ended at a better time. But in that moment, when I first found out about it, I feel like the best way to describe how I felt was dread. I was filled with dread. I was like, the idea of having to go out and find a new space sounded really daunting to me. And I knew deep down that it probably meant a lot of things were going to change. There were probably going to be changes in terms of the amount of rent that I pay. There were probably going to be changes to my income. There were probably going to be changes to the schedule that my students have become so accustomed to over the years. There were probably going to be changes to class times. And when I was thinking about all of this, like before I even started looking for new spaces, I was noticing a lot of really interesting old stories that were coming up in my head. And I noticed that I was telling myself things like, it's going to be hard to find a new space to move my classes. I was telling myself that I was going to get rejected and nobody would be interested in hosting my classes at their space. I was telling myself that there aren't a lot of spaces available, that all of the spaces that are out there are already used, they're already fully booked. There isn't going to be anywhere for us to go. And like, I'm just sharing this to be super real about like where my mind went when this initially happened. And I was even getting into some worst case scenario thinking. And I was pretty much telling myself that like there wouldn't be a space for my classes to continue, that I would have to end this amazing thing that I'd built and that, you know, my community had built, and that I would be letting so many people down and everyone would hate me. Like I was literally, this was like Christmas time and I was like spiraling over this. Like I was losing sleep over this for quite a while. And I also didn't want to say anything to my students about this because I'm really big on like, you know, I don't want to just show up to class one day and be like, oh, we don't have a place to go and like cause everybody a bunch of unnecessary stress. I really wanted to have a plan in place and have my ducks in a row and then let everyone know, you know, the lease is ending on this space and we've outgrown it and we need a bigger spot. And so something really interesting happened because as it turns out, and I know that this is obvious, but the best remedy for the doom and anxiety that I was feeling was to take action and start reaching out to potential spaces. And I did wallow in procrastination for a little while. And it was also like the holidays. And I was kind of using that as an excuse. I was like, oh, well, people aren't going to check their emails during the holidays. I need to wait till January. And then I'm like, I need to wait till, you know, the second week of January. And I was full of it. And anyways, just like reaching out to some places and, you know, some connections in the community that I had, like even just sending them that first email already gave me relief. Like just taking that first step and that first action towards the change that needed to happen. And what I noticed this time around compared to 6 years ago when I was reaching out to potential new spaces was that the response was really different than it was before. So instead of being met with rejection and being met with like instant no's, I found out that all of these places wanted to meet with me. They wanted to sit down and show me their spaces. And even more than that, a lot of these spaces actually wanted to accommodate me and my group of yoga students. They were interested in what I'd built and they were interested in the nature of these classes because they're a little bit different than like what's typically offered. And I started to realize that there were actually a lot of potential spaces out there that I could move my classes into, and I was going to find something that was going to work. And that was like such a big shift for me. Like it really, really started to change my outlook. And I was able to see this change that could have been and was initially kind of destabilizing. I was able to start to see it as something that was really exciting. So rather than this being like a desperate search to find just any place to move my classes to, I actually started to get a little bit more specific about what I wanted. And I started to consider, like, in an ideal world and in an ideal situation, what would be like the very best outcome for me and for my community. And so I came up with a list of wishes and like things that I was looking for in a new space. And this included a space that would allow us to keep our existing class schedule. I was looking for a space where there wouldn't be any significant changes to tuition prices for my students. Life is already super expensive, and I didn't want to be another place that was like, we have to raise our prices. Another one of my wishes was that the space would offer us room to grow. So I wanted a space that was bigger in terms of like square footage, had room for more mats so that I could stop turning people away from my class. And ideally, I wanted a space that had shared community values. And the space that we are currently in, like that we were previously in, they definitely have, shared community values with us as well. But like, I wanted a space that understands that these yoga classes are something that's really valuable to the community and that they're actually about more than yoga. Like, it's about the social connection as well. It's about, forming intergenerational connections. And I wanted a space that like sees the value in what's being offered, that it's more than a transaction. It's more than like, oh, I just pay you rent every month. It's like, no, you also, believe in my vision and like what we're doing. And so with this kind of new outlook, I ended up visiting a ton of different spaces. I basically spent all of January going to meetings and like going to tours of spaces in my community. And honestly, all of the spaces were really great. Like, they all had something to offer. I could totally envision me and my students in these spaces. And I got to the point where I actually had to choose where we were going to go. Like, I had to make a decision based on all of these places that I had seen. And it's just so interesting because that kind of scarcity mindset that I initially found myself with back in December, that I was holding on to from past experiences, really wasn't my reality anymore. And I actually had abundant choice when it came to our move. And this was a really big awakening for me about other stories that I might be carrying with me rather, from past experiences that are not true anymore. So anyways, just something that I'm thinking about right now. So out of all of the spaces that I went to view, there was one that left me with like a really visceral feeling, and it was really, really good. And I am not the type of person to make decisions based off of vibes. I am practical. I like to make choices that are grounded in reality. But this one particular space was really, really special, and it couldn't be denied. The local museum in the community that I teach my classes in is actually a National Historic Site because it used to be the home of the city's city hall. And in this part of British Columbia, there aren't a ton of historic buildings. It is not the norm. And like, I know this will sound funny in other parts of the world, but like, it's actually uncommon here to like have a building that's over 100 years old. It's not like Europe or other parts of North America, like, Montreal or New York City, where there's a mix of like old buildings and new buildings. So this particular building stands out, and like it's all white and it's got these pillars. It kind of looks like a little mini version of the White House. It's actually like super cute though. And inside this like old historic building, there is a gorgeous room on the top floor that these days is used for meetings, for community events. You can rent it out for your wedding. It's just like this gorgeous, big, empty room. And it has high ceilings. It has these big, like, arched windows on 3 of the walls. It has this door access to, like, this upper level balcony. And when I walked into it, I was just like, yep, like, this is the place. It's just, to me, it's like, because like I am a fashion girly at heart. I appreciate art. I appreciate architecture. And I was like, yeah, like this is iconic. This is chic. This is where I need to be. like that part of my personality was just so pleased. And one of the things that I love about this space is like, yes, it's beautiful, but it is also still unconventional. It's not necessarily a space that you would expect to find a yoga class. And I have always been a fan of using unconventional spaces for yoga because I feel like they soften some of the barriers that folks might have around some of the more typical spaces. I just think for some people, it kind of removes those barriers to entry and maybe doesn't seem quite as intimidating when the yoga is happening in an unexpected space. And so in the midst of all of this, I had a couple of meetings and I had the opportunity to sit down with the executive director of the museum and tell her about our classes and why they're a little bit different. And this was exciting for me because I actually feel like I got to kind of like pitch like my classes and, what I've built up over the years and be like, look, like this is what we've done. And this is why I think it would be a good fit for you guys. And, I explained to her how like I've always been an advocate for pre-registered yoga series because that model of teaching lends itself towards education that is progressive, and because that model of teaching is very relationship-based and it encourages relationship between students as well as between student and teacher. And I also got to explain to her how like over the years, through consistency, through showing up over and over and over again, that a really genuinely kind intergenerational community of students has formed. And it's so cool. Like we have students from their 20s to their 80s practicing together in the same yoga classes. And I truly don't think that that's common. And, the community that we've built is real. It is not abstract. And it's a space where if you show up consistently and like you make an effort to, be part of it, like people will know your name. They recognize you. They want to ask you how your day was or how your week was. And the museum was like, yeah, like we share these same community values with you and we want you in our space. And it just really felt like the stars aligned. Like everything on my wish list came true. And that space was meant to be. So the rental agreement is signed and we are moving into our big new space in the museum in 2 weeks. And I'm just so excited about how large it is. It's truly one of the largest rooms that I will have ever like consistently taught in. And that is something that's really important to me because I hold the belief that community shouldn't be conditional and that, if you're going through a hard time, for example, like you've lost your job or something like that, I want to be able to comp your classes to help you get through that rough patch. And so to me, a community-minded class model means that if most people are paying tuition every month and my classes are busy and successful and I'm paying myself well, then there's room within that to float a few students here and there who might be kind of down on their luck. And it doesn't cost me anything to do that. It doesn't take away from me or like anyone else's experience for me to do that. And I've always done this. Like I've always had this mindset. I just don't advertise it because like I'm not looking for clout. But what I found is because my other space was smaller and it was so maxed out, was that it was getting harder and harder for me to be as generous as I want to be because like I literally just didn't have the extra space in the room. So now that I am moving into a bigger space, it feels really, really exciting because like even though, you know, it's not like I'm doing this for tons and tons of people, but like I have this space now to comp classes for people who need it. I have the space to be able to give back when it's needed. And that is really, really important to me to be able to kind of use my position to improve access to yoga for the broader community. And because I'm an independent teacher and I am my own boss, I get to make those decisions. And that feels really good and really fun. Yeah. And you know, like the only constant in life is change, and change can be hard. Like even though it's always happening, it's still hard. And I think for those of us who have taught yoga for a long time, or, you know, those of you listening who've practiced yoga for a long time, most of us know what it's like to lose a yoga space that was really special to us and really important to us. You know, the spaces that we practice in really are like those crucial third spaces in our communities that hold us when we are going through life and all of the things that life brings as part of the human experience. And I think it's only natural to feel a little bit attached to those spaces and maybe even a little bit nostalgic about them. And, you know, some of my students, and myself included, have literally seen dozens of spaces come and go over the years. And it is unfortunately just kind of like the nature of this industry. But whenever you announce a move, which I had to do earlier this month, it can initially feel like, oh no, here we go again. Like, oh, we're moving again. We've done this before. And, you know, I know that it's hard, but I also trust our capacity as a community to adapt to change and to like embrace change and adjust to it together. And I think that once we're all kind of settled into our new space, that it won't take very long to adapt just because the new space is so nice. It's going to be so good. So when I zoom out and I really look at this whole experience, something that really strikes me is just how much of this transition was actually an internal process for me over the past couple of months. And I realized that for a long time, I was carrying some stories and like holding on to some stories from an earlier chapter in my career. And those were stories that were really influenced by feelings of uncertainty, by rejection, by exploitation, by like having to make things work and not having a ton of resources. And yeah, it's just really interesting because when I reflect, I realize that, you know, I have a lot more experience now. I have a proven track record that is visible through the community that's grown slowly and organically over the years. And even though my outer circumstances as a teacher are different now than they used to be, like even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I think that it takes time for our minds and our bodies to kind of catch up with like our current reality. And I think a lot of us, like myself included, walk around and operate from outdated narratives without realizing it. And that was something that I realized in this process, was like I was holding on to stories and telling myself stories that used to be true for me as a yoga teacher 6 years ago, but they're not true anymore. And I don't have to operate from that place. So that's been really, really interesting. And another thing that, was really, really a big lesson in all of this was just remembering how quickly my anxiety and uncertainty dissolved when I stopped spinning in my head and just took action. Like as soon as I started sending those emails, reaching out to places, and then showing up and like viewing potential spaces for my students, I immediately felt better. So like rather than, just staying hypothetical and like filling in the blanks with worst case scenarios, which was kind of what I was doing, every conversation that I had, every email that I sent, it just like brought me back to reality. And what I realized was that the reality that I'm in is a lot more supportive than I was imagining it to be. And that was a very, very powerful reminder in all of this. And again, I think one of the reasons why my situation has changed, because 6 years ago, I was just in the process of trying to build up pre-registered classes. And even though I was a great yoga teacher and, blah, 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 like I didn't have a proven track record yet of being able to run pre-registered yoga classes really well and run them consistently 12 months a year, year after year. And so things are different for me now. And I realized that consistency and that thing that I've built has created some leverage for me. And the small space that we were in, even though it was unglamorous, it wasn't very fancy, it was, just a clinic, it held a lot of meaning for me, because that was where I was able to prove to myself that an independent yoga business could be sustainable. And it's where I fully realized and fully understood that people would come to class because of the experience that they were having, because of the sense of belonging they felt, because of how they felt being in the room. And I didn't need to be in some sort of aesthetics-driven, trendy space in order to make that happen. And it was through that long-term consistency, through showing up over and over again, that trust was built. And now I'm able to look back and see that I'm standing in a really different position now than I was as a yoga teacher 6 years ago. So yeah, it's just I don't know, there's been a lot of lessons over the past couple of months. And again, I think just rather than searching out of fear or desperation, when I realized that, I actually had a choice in the matter and that this could be a change that's really exciting, then I started asking myself better questions. And I started asking myself, okay, what is going to be the very best situation for me and for my students? What would actually serve my students? What kind of space do we need? What would support the long-term growth of my community? What kind of environment reflects the values that we've been practicing together? And once I was able to make that shift and stop feeling like everything was doomed, everything just felt a lot more abundant and everything kind of flowed. So Yeah, I think like the space that we're moving into is really, really exciting just because it's so aligned on every level. Like it's so aligned in terms of shared values. It's so aligned in terms of the community focus that I have and that the museum has. And I think that it's just like, it's a really, really significant shift. It's super, super exciting. It's super meaningful. And it is a space that is going to allow for more generosity. It's a space that's going to allow more people to come practice. And to me, that is what a sustainable, community-minded business model looks like. And I feel like it's really cool, like for us as yoga teachers to know that we can create our own business models. And like the way that I operate my business and operate my classes doesn't have to be the same as yours. It doesn't have to be the same as the studio down the road. And like we can really just like make things fit our needs and the needs of our communities. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, I'm just super, super excited. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be stepping into a new space together, probably with some of you who are listening to this. So yeah, it's, it's like the thing that feels destabilizing, the thing that we avoid and that we don't want to do is usually the doorway into the next chapter. Like it's usually the stepping stone to something that is going to be better and that is going to be like something that is going to provide growth for me and my business and for the community. And yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about like the backstory with you today. I hope that you'll be able to follow along. I didn't go on too many tangents. And I also hope that you feel inspired and encouraged by today's episode. I really enjoyed sharing that with you, and I cannot wait to give you some updates once we start running classes in the new space. So as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune into Yoga Insider Podcast. It truly means so much to me. See you next time.